You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Yep, it's the world's most dangerous morning show, The Breakfast Club. Charlamagne the God, Angela Yee. I don't know why Envy decided not to be here for this one.
Well, Envy's, yeah.
Because he has some experience in this department.
Yes. But Envy is actually away with his 5 children. So.
Yes.
Amazing.
We have a special guest. Latham Thomas is here.
Hey.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me, you all. I listen to you every morning. I'm so grateful to be here and have this pivotal discussion with you. So
thank you. So now, are you a doctor?
I am not a doctor.
Okay.
I am a doula. I'm a women's wellness expert and an author. My real focus is to help women reclaim their bodies as sacred and to own their glow, right? So part of that is through the work that I do with delivering babies, which is as a emotional support, as a doula, really, and physical support for people. So it's not what the doctor does, but, you know, the doctor comes in to, like, catch the baby, but I do everything else leading up to that.
Got you.
It's like a producer for your birth.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? You were there with DJ Khaled when Assad was born.
Yes, on Snapchat, which Nicole, by the way, did not want.
Right.
So that was a little bit like frustrating to have to navigate that. But I think it was a beautiful lesson for the world because many people did not have ever seen a birth. And so that was the first experience for a lot of people to see a beautiful birth like that unfold. And I think that's a powerful teaching lesson, you know? So there was, you know, upside for that.
Right. As a woman, though, wouldn't you tell Khaled, this ain't about you, bro? All right, make things as comfortable for Nicole as possible.
Yes, but I think, you know, he had been talking about it, that he was going to do that for a long time. So I think, you know, and I think now they've softened into, like, that's part of their life, you know?
Yeah, because
like
she used to be very irritated every time he put the camera on her. And
yes.
She's realizing now it's just part of being...
It's part of who they are.
That's so uncomfortable for a lady, though. You laying there, you got your legs open.
But it's a very
you
natural
might poop on
thing,
yourself,
too.
Like...
But, you know, when you're in the throes of labor, as you probably know, having experienced it with your wife, you're not as focused. You go into this zone, you know what I mean? So you're not really considering what's happening in the room around you at that point. Yeah. Because at a certain point, birth becomes a meditation, a trance. So you kind of shut out all the things that are happening around you. And so, like, nobody's thinking about, like, is there an intern in the room? Are there, like, nurses walking in and out? You know what I mean? At that point. But I think leading up to that, you really have to set the tone for women to feel safety, security, and a sense of real belonging. And if we're able to create that, which is what I do, then she can kind of get into that space of, you know, being really connected to her body and out of her head, so to speak.
Now, for you, Latham, what led you to this journey of becoming a doula?
Well, my son, who's now 15, he turned 15 in July.
He's an artist, right?
He is. He's a DJ, and he makes beats and stuff, plays music. But and I also knew that when I was pregnant with him, by the way, because he would like kick to rhythms and stuff. And so, but what I noticed was I was in New York City, and at the time there was a birth center on 14th Street. It's right next door to like the Derby or whatever it's called now. So my son thinks he was born in a nightclub. But it was the one freestanding birth center, meaning that you could have a natural birth there and just do whatever you wanted. You would walk in, you feel comfortable, and it was outside of the realms of a hospital. So they had midwives there, and I had an amazing delivery. I walked out, I had my son at like 1 in the afternoon, and I walked out like at 6 p.m. and I was like, where are the grown-ups? Like, y'all letting me leave with this baby? But it was so empowering because I was in there with women and in the dark and in a bathtub and just like in a zone, you know? And I think that like 20 minutes after my son was born, I was like, I have to protect this process for women because people never told me that it could be that way, that it could be really like a trance. And, you know, I had an experience where like my ancestors showed up during the birth.
Wow.
Really?
So I felt like, okay, somebody has to protect this for women and really be a safeguard for them in this process. And so often, you know, we're subject to like what a doctor wants or, you know, what a system sort of like sets in motion, and you kind of like, you know, succumb to that without knowing that you have rights and that you have the ability to take charge of the process. So, and knowing that a mother is very vulnerable, I knew that I needed to help protect that process for women. So that's kind of what led me to step into it in a deeper way.
Like, if people always ask for an epidural, right? They'd be like, oh, I don't want to get an epidural, but then they're in so much pain. Sometimes women are like, okay, give it to me.
That's what I'm saying. Are there benefits to natural childbirth?
Yes. So it's interesting because the epidural, when we think about pain, there's so many aspects of our lives where we experience pain and then where we tolerate it for beauty, for all kinds of things, right? We'll tolerate pain. And then we don't ever think about the idea of experiencing it and going through it for childbirth. And it's actually like a rite of passage, right? And also the pain informs the body of what's happening. And so there's a biofeedback that's happening with the mother and the baby with sensation, right? And so the way that we can lower the intensity of pain is keeping a mother comfortable, keeping her out of a fear state, because there's something called a fear, tension, pain cycle. So if you feel tension, that's going to spark fear and then create more pain in the body. So if you can start to you can start off making a woman feel safe, secure, like she's, in a bubble of love, she'll have a lower sensation of pain. But even if she's experiencing that, there's so many measures that we can do with her to keep her comfortable. And so we use all of the natural things that we can. And then epidural is there as an option, but it's not like the first line of defense. Right. It's like something that we use, and we try to use it way further out because, it does pass, the drug, any drugs that you experience in a labor do cross the blood placental barrier, which means that the baby does get contact with them. So you want to minimize that.
So that's probably why you were able to walk out, because you didn't have to get an epidural. And I would assume you're groggy for a long time.
Yes. And then you also, because of what happens, it's like a numbing, right? So it goes inside of the epidural shaft in the spine. So what happens is your whole lower body feels numb. So can you imagine that you can't get out of the bed? It makes it uncomfortable because you want to move around in labor, right? It's you want to move your body. A lot of women say, I want to twerk my baby out. So, you know what I mean? You can't do that.
That sounds fun.
That's when they tell you walk around the room and stuff?
You can walk around the room, yeah. So it's much easier, to have access to the water, to movement. A lot of women too, that I ask women to pack vibrators because pain and pleasure run concurrently. But if you're, yes. And so if you can have a mom go in the bathroom, turn the lights out, have her vibrator, put her music. Yes. That helps to mitigate the pain too.
That's amazing.
Why are Black mothers in the U.S. dying during childbirth more than 3 times the rate of white women?
So I'm so glad that you asked that. And we're in a crisis. Actually, the CDC has said that Black women are in a state of emergency. And it's a shame that not on every single platform we should be talking about this. In our media, in our Black media specifically, we should be talking about this. And so we have to be the ones to carry this story. So I'm so thankful for you all to have this conversation. We don't think about, there's a lot of invisible factors that come into play. There's things like preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure, which happens, I know last week, or I think it was a week before, Beyonce had announced in her Vogue article that she had preeclampsia and ended up with high blood pressure, had to have an emergency C-section for her twins. Serena Williams had talked about having, she had, I think it was some nodules on her lungs or something like that, like clots and stuff. And so she ended up having a C-section, but it led to her getting the clots. And so these are 2 powerful, powerful women who have all of the money and resources in the world. You would think that they would be protected, and they weren't, right? And then we have women who don't have the money and access, but that are, that are victims of systemic racism, of being in a system whereby, doctors, if you go to a hospital, it's already steeped in the culture of supremacy, right? It's already we're better than you, you know what I mean? And even though there's beautiful doctors who work very well with us and with their clients, there's still, the culture is one of we know everything, let us handle it, right? And this is a process. It's not a disease, right? It's natural. It's how all of us got here. And so we need to protect it as such, and only, disrupt when there's a medical emergency, And so in many cases, Black women aren't getting the care that they should. And they're not getting, even in their appointments, they may get all their prenatal appointments, but the doctors aren't really connecting with them. So there's a cultural barrier. And there's also this incidence of not detecting or identifying some of these illnesses that people have until the baby comes. And then when those things happen, sometimes the mother might not die during childbirth, but within the first year postpartum, that still counts as maternal mortality. Just like in the first year of life, it does count for infant mortality. So we look at that, as well as when a mother gets she's so injured by the process that she can't live a normal life afterwards, then that also counts. Right. So we need to really reform a system and have adequate support for women, which is why doulas are so important, because they help as soldiers on the front line to protect these women, and they also know how to navigate the process and how to navigate the hospital setting. And that's really important for women, especially for women of color who, if you speak a different language, if you're, under-resourced, if you have a certain insurance, because the first thing they ask you when you call, right,
insurance.
what's your name, what's your insurance?
Mm-hmm.
And then they can categorize you of how they want to treat you sometimes. And people don't want to hear this, I'm sure, because, we have this like illusion that, there's actual health in healthcare, but we really need to put the health back into healthcare. And particularly when it comes to Black women, we need to put this at the top of the feminist agenda and make sure that we protect birth and make it safe for all women. And if we can work to create safety for the most marginalized, everybody will benefit.
And it's important to ask questions too. A lot of times we go to the doctor and just listen to what they say and don't question things. Like
right.
A lot of times doctors will tell you to get a hysterectomy, right? And I've heard this happen on so many different occasions for women who have fibroids or they feel like they might have cervical cancer, and then the doctor recommends that you get a hysterectomy, and they actually really try to push that when you don't really have to.
Right.
And once you get a hysterectomy, you can't have kids anymore after that.
Well, think about the benefit for them, right? Like a surgery, like having a surgical procedure is more money for them. Like the insurance company, like that's where the racket is. If they could say to you, oh, we can modify your diet, you could cut out dairy, you could do a lot more things to manage your stress. There's things that we can do that like remove some of the estrogen that you're, accumulating from foods that you eat. If we looked at that first and had people look at their diet and lifestyle, then like the hospitals wouldn't be in business in that way, right? So yeah, I think for disproportionately, Black women get advised to have hysterectomies. My mother was advised to do that for many years, and I helped her. I was like, Mom, don't, and I gave her like protocol to do to kind of, continue with the process. But she had a lot of things that were making it so that she ended up going that route ultimately, but she warded it off for years.
Right.
I think that the first thing you come in, they're saying to you, let's like remove your uterus. Nobody ever says to the, a man, he comes in, he's like, oh, well, I have a problem. Well, let's take off your testicles. Like nobody, nobody is going to say that, because also the uterus is a very powerful player in pleasure for women. So when you think about, it's not just a useless organ if it doesn't, hold a baby. It's also powerful for our pleasure, for orgasm. So, if you have to take it, let's take it because it's like there's a medical reason to do so, not because like it's inconvenient.
Remember when Wale called up here after he had his baby and he really wanted to call to talk about epidurals in particular? You remember that, Charlamagne? He called up specifically. He wanted to talk about how he doesn't think women should have epidurals. And
man, I don't want to hear that from no man.
Right, no, that is. I agree with that because you don't know what type of pain somebody's going through. But it was just interesting because for him to call up and be so strong and passionate about it after his baby was born, it was just interesting to me that was something that was on top of his mind.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me earlier that I want to have a child because I'm having another girl.
Yeah.
And yes, I want a boy, but it's not worth it to me because I see those mortality rates of all these Black women dying during childbirth. And my wife's last pregnancy, she developed what's it called? Something diabetes.
Gestational diabetes.
Yeah. And she ended up having to have an emergency C-section a month early. Mm-hmm. And so now we have a scheduled C-section for the next child. So I'm like, it's not worth it to me. Like, I would rather stay away from it altogether.
See, that's the thing that is sad to me, right? Because people then say, like, I feel like I don't have hope. It's this entire, if we can think about the landscape that we're in, when we arrived on these shores in like the 1600s, the first Black granny midwives arrived, and they carried with them in their hair seed from the motherland that ended up in the soils here so that we would have our medicine here. They delivered not only their babies, they delivered the master's babies. They even took care of the master when there was no doctor around. And these were women who birthed this entire nation, who breastfed and wet nursed this entire nation. And this is the legacy that we come from. So we know intuitively how to give birth. We know also how to take care of our bodies. We just have to reconnect with our medicine, our ancestral traditions. And we also have to know that like we deserve support during childbirth. Like nobody should be walking around thinking like, oh my God, something bad is going to happen. We should actually have the support so that we can work through the trauma, through the fear. And that's part of the work that a doula does too, is to make sure that we address any triggers, any fears, any anxieties, so that you can overcome and work through that, so that when you get to the showtime, like the labor, that you feel like
you delivered Swizz and Alicia's baby.
Yes.
Now that you said showtime.
Yeah, exactly, right? So when you get to that, though, that you feel at ease, you know what I mean? And that there's a lot of things that we can use that are mindfulness tools like meditation and do yoga and like connect with the body. And all of these tools, by the way, are like belong to us. Like we think like, I see people will be like, oh, well, you know, that's for white people or that's for this. No, it's for all of us. In fact, like even with acupuncture, that's a huge part of what we, you know, have mothers do. Acupuncture was really introduced in the US by the Black Panthers. You know, like that's how, even though like it's a Chinese medicine, they brought it here and made it like accessible to the people. So we have to start using these tools to kind of help us manage the stress and the anxiety and also the fear that we have around what we see happening around us, and know that it's possible to have a different outcome. And most of the time it is like that we have, you know, beautiful births and they go the way we want. But there is this staggering information that shows us that like if we don't have the support, if we don't address like this critical issue nationwide, that we are going to see a health trajectory that does not look good. So if we can right now, I think, concentrate our energy on getting our politicians on board with this, really making sure that in our communities and also with our doctors, and find out like, what are you doing to protect Black women in birth? You know, like ask the practitioners, because you can know right away if these are people who you want to be delivering your baby with, you know? And if they don't know about this information, that's also a sign.
Right.
So that's what you mean when you say you want to help women reclaim childbirth,
I want
reconnect
women
with the
to-
ancestors.
I want women to reclaim their bodies as sacred, because everything in culture turns us away from our bodies, like tells us not to listen to our bodies. Like you could take, you know, a pill to modulate every function in your body. So to me, it's like we're taught to not feel, which is why like when you talk about the epidural, that's, you know, it's disconnecting from feeling. But, you know, birth is like a rite of passage. And so, you know, yes, I'm thankful that we have the epidural in an emergency situation, or when in a situation where it's a compassionate choice for a mother. But in many cases, it's like, oh, well, you don't have to go through this. It's like, no, this is a process. And on the other side of that, I know that mothers feel a certain satisfaction when they come on the other side of anybody who goes through something that's like heroic. On the other side of it, you have something that you didn't have when you started. And so to me, that's like the blessing, is to go through. And the only way out is to go in. And so if we go through that process, and not to say like, you know, to deny yourself if you need something, but to see like, to push the threshold and see how far you can go. And then if you need it, it's fine, it's there. But many cases women don't. They just really need support. And that doesn't exist in our culture. Like we don't support women.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because sometimes people will be like, I'm getting an epidural. I don't care. They don't even know if they're going to need it.
They don't even know if they're in pain. You know, like I've had women who didn't even realize that they were at the very end.
Right.
Like they were like, oh wait, I'm that dilated. Like I could push soon. Like
Yana delivered her baby right in the remember her and Iman together.
Yeah,
she didn't
did it
make it to the
herself.
hospital.
Yeah, exactly. In the tub, right at home. So yeah, so sometimes you don't even realize. But I think again, if we could shift the culture around pain and start to think about like, no, this is like every contraction is me getting closer to meeting my baby. And like, let me connect with like, this is, you know, each time my body contracts, like I'm also pushing, you know, fluid out of the baby's lungs, pumping the lungs so that the baby can breathe when it gets here. Like there's all kinds of ways we can really envision. And we have these mindfulness tools so that we can transcend pain also. So I think it's like we need to teach people this stuff. And this is stuff that we can start doing now. Like we can start doing this with our young daughters, nieces and nephews, and, you know, like around, you know, stress management or pain and tolerating things that happen in our lives, like emotional things that upset us, right? We need to start using these tools, period. You know, not just waiting until it's time to have a baby.
Now, Latham, to backtrack for a second, you talked about your ancestors and seeing them while you were giving birth. Can you just delve into that a little more, what that experience was like?
Oh my God, so I don't cry up in here. So what it was like was I was at that place, Elizabeth Seton, like I said, right, on 14th. And my water broke. Actually, this is the most exciting part, was that my water broke at 12:30 at night. I had been walking around all day. You know how they say, like, towards the end, just walk. And, you know, the baby was like a week late. And his dad was already like, you're on punishment. We're supposed to be on vacation. You need to hurry up and be born. And so anyway, so we walked. And then at 12:30, I got in bed. And I was sitting there. We were listening to Mahalia Jackson. And she was like belting this gospel. And I just said, I just wish this baby would give me a sign, you know? And I was sitting in the bed. And then as she was singing, like my water broke, and I was in the bed, and he was like, "You're peeing in the bed." I was like, "I'm not peeing in the bed. It's water." And I got up, and it was like Sex in the City, like with Miranda. It like splashed. I was like, "Oh my God." So then I knew like it was, but you know, we were so excited. So we like called all our friends. You're like, "Yo, the baby's coming." It was like, you know, he was acting like it was like he was a promoter, like, "Yo." So yeah, 12 o'clock. VIP, exactly. Like, who's coming? And so then like, I think like 9 hours later or so, like around 9 a.m., we rolled up. I took a shower like at 6 in the morning. I just stayed by myself. And then around 9, I was like, I couldn't talk. Like it was just taking over my body. And so then we got there. I got in the room. It was dark. There was a tub. I was in the tub by myself in the dark. He was asleep, you know, because we were up watching jazz documentaries until like 6 in the morning. And so I was like, "Yo, can you like wake up and help me?" You know,
hold my hand or something.
Like something, right? So I was like, "Hey, wake up."
If I'm up, you're up.
I made that mistake the first time.
Right, but then you figure it out. So, but mostly I was just happy to be in the bed, you know, by myself, and in the tub. And so then at the very end though, my son's cord was wrapped around his shoulder like a backpack, and so as he was coming down, his heart rate was decelerating. And so they asked me to get out of the tub and get in the bed and like squat him out or whatever. And that's when I felt this like horseshoe shape around me. And I looked up, and then I saw like, and this is before Black Panther, by the way, I saw like this looking down on me, like these ancestors cloaked. I didn't recognize the faces, but there was like this soul recognition.
Are you from the Bronx?
I am not from the Bronx.
Okay, just making sure.
No.
Trying to figure out why you throwing up the X. All right,
No, exactly, right? But it was just like this, and I looked up. I was like, I want to be up there, and I felt myself ascend out of my body, and I could see the whole process unfolding.
Wow. I've heard that before.
It happens. And so then I was saying things, and they were like looking around, like, what is she talking about? Because she can't possibly see this from where she is. And so all I have to say is like that experience, and people who were in the room remember it. So that alone to me was like, whoa, you have this out-of-body experience. And it's also connected with neurochemicals like DMT, which is called the God chemical. And that chemical we release at high-level arousal and orgasm, at birth, and at death. And that's the one where you see like the light, there's like this higher consciousness. And also at the 49th day of life, you know, in conception, when a baby is still growing inside of you, they start to release DMT, which means that's their first experience of God at 49 days. And a lot of world cultures believe that that's the first day the soul enters into the fetus. So it's like you have this, you know, cocktail of hormones, including oxytocin, which I'm sure you heard of before. And so you're like in this, like, you're just like faded, but you don't even like, there's no drugs. It's like your body creates its own internal pharmacy, and it creates its own drugs to basically help you move through the process. And so you really get gypped if you don't go through that process, you know. And you can still have like an amazing birth. I'm not saying that everybody has to not use drugs or whatever. What I'm saying though is that there is something that people are denying us when they just say, oh, you don't have to go through this, like you don't have to put yourself through the pain. There's something on the other side of that if we can be supported and if we could feel safe. And the main things that women need to give birth are a feeling of safety, security, and not being watched, not being observed. Like imagine you try to have sex and people are watching. It's not going to be easy. You know what I mean? So the same thing for women. It's like whatever it takes to like get a baby out is what it takes to like, you know, like if you have sex and stuff, like what do you need? You need like low lighting. It needs to smell good. It's got to be clean. It's got to have good music. Like, you know, like that kind of vibe. And the same for a baby, you know, like to go into labor, you need to like have lower lights, the mood, right? We have to control the mood. And so we can protect that if we have the people around us, right? Like our partners or the doula, the doctor, get everybody on the same page. And my job is to like make sure everybody's on the same page.
Speaking of sex, I didn't know sex while pregnant helps lower blood pressure and helps you to sleep better.
Yeah, sex while pregnant is amazing.
Sex does that when you're not even pregnant.
No, I know sex while pregnant is amazing, but I didn't know it had actual health benefits.
Yes, it has health benefits. It also, you know, can prostaglandins, which are in semen, naturally ripen the cervix, which means it helps to initiate labor. So when it's time to initiate labor, semen deposits against the cervix will soften it right on up so that the baby can come down.
It's like a lubricant, kind of.
So guys, stop being afraid to have sex.
Yes,
while
and the baby does not. Yeah, it's not like this. Not an issue for the baby. The baby feels rocking and movement all the time, so there's nothing. So it's fine.
It's not going to touch the baby.
It's not touching. Please, guys, wish no. It's not touching the baby. It's not at all touching the baby. But yeah, it's definitely healthy for that. It helps lower the blood pressure, but also like relaxation, right? Stress management, which is so important for women to feel like no stress, right? So like, yes, definitely sex. And if she doesn't want to, have penetration, because a lot of women don't at a certain time, like there's a lot of movement and the body changes so much. So, there's other things you can do.
Make your jaw work.
Yes,
hey.
Cunnilingus.
Yeah, get it popping.
Charlemagne.
The name of the book is Own Your Glow. What is it about pregnancy that gives women that glow, especially around the eighth month?
So again, that's hormones that, help to create basically like a natural makeup for women. Progesterone, estrogen, mostly progesterone. And and it also softens up the ligaments, makes the body more, soft and supple and open and receptive, right? And that's the same thing that it does for the skin. So yeah, you definitely see, and lots of people say when they see celebrities right away, because I know like in my work, people always assume soon as they think somebody's pregnant, they call me like, you working with them? Are they pregnant? But yes, that glow you can see much earlier than 8 months.
I love it.
Yeah, it's nice, right? Like you don't just like throw some water on the face, beat, right?
Now, speaking of your book, Own Your Glow,
yes.
I want to talk about something because we talk about this a lot on the Breakfast Club, right?
Yeah.
And this is about forgiveness. And you talk about meditation, forgiveness, and mantras of resentment also.
I know you need this because he has a different forgiveness practice.
So, like, I would love for you to just expand on that from your book. Yeah,
so, when I think about forgiveness, and I also, I'm a Taurus. Like if you do something to us, we're done. Like we're really easy at being done too. So but what I've learned is, when we carry with us resentment for people, and we carry with us like what someone did, if we don't let that go, that's like poison for us. You know what I mean? You're not like directing that towards them. You're directing that towards yourself. And also, as you move through life, that is a mantra of resentment. Like when we repeat, like, oh, this happened, like we have to create space for like other things to come in, and we can't welcome new things when we're sitting with like what's festering inside of us. And so I just believe that we can reframe that conversation with ourselves, and also look at certain things as like, okay, what was the lesson in that? What was the gift in that? And also. And sometimes it might be like, I'm not messing with that person no more. Or it might be that, you need to do some personal work to figure out like how you can feel comfortable with what happened. Because you can never change the past, but you can change your relationship with it. And so to me, it's really about like us fortifying ourselves and understanding that like it's in our hands, and all of what we experience, I think, if we use our perception to create the reality that it is that we want to live into, we have to like look at the things that like don't serve us. I think about it like when you go to the airport, and I always travel light. Like I hate when I travel with people and they got to go to the ticket counter.
Check the bag.
Man, I'm like, let's just go, because I'm always late, by the way. So I'm always like let me get through. Like, oh, what time is your flight? Because like my flight.
Now I don't like when people are late all the time. I get there super early.
See, yeah, I'm not even doing it early. I'm like still in bed. Like, let me see how many more minutes can I like doing the math of trying to figure out how to get there late. But no, I always go with a small bag, a small carry-on, and the one that's regulation size, which I'm pissed when they ask me to check it. But I always go with that small bag. But when you go with people and they have all this stuff, and they're trying to unpack it and figure out what to take. That's like life, a life metaphor of like, what is it that I'm taking with me on this journey? Because you cannot take everything with you, and where you're going, you need to be traveling light. And so we need to release. And I had a fire many years ago, actually the day before Thanksgiving. Did you read that?
I read about this.
Yeah, I had a fire the day before Thanksgiving, and I remember I was supposed to host it at my house. It was in Harlem. I lived there for 11 years, and in that time, I knew I was supposed to move, right? Like, how you get this feeling like it's time to move, you outgrow. The space was beautiful, but it was like I was like something was bubbling that was next, and it was like
a space you shared with your ex, and it's time.
Yes, I lived there with my ex. Like there was a whole bunch of memories. I needed to like move on, and for whatever reason, I was like not looking into new, looking online at apartments and taking it seriously. And then one day, I leave my house. And then I'm in my office and I get a call, and this guy, my neighbor, who I never talked to, and he's like, yo, your house is on fire. I was like, what? And it was like, in processing it at the time, I was like, okay, I was very calm. But at the same time, I knew that there was something there, that there was a lesson on the other side of it. And what it was like, I needed to move on. God was like, girl, you're not going to do this. Let me like remove this apartment for you so that you can find your way. I ended up living on one of my favorite streets that I always wanted to live on. It was on my vision board. I ended up living on Jane Street for like 5 months until I found my apartment in Chelsea. And then I eventually moved to Brooklyn and opened this women's space, which was my dream. And now I have this amazing women's center for Mama Glow, but like I would have still been in Harlem had
if
that fire not happened. Yeah.
Sometimes that's the push that you need. At the time, it might feel a little bit of a tragedy.
Right.
But you're like, okay, I would have just stayed here. Or that's like, even if you get fired from a job, certain things happen. You go through a breakup.
Totally.
And it's all for a reason.
Because we be boohooing over people that we met like 3 months ago. You know what I mean? And we really need to look at that like, this is like God always knows what he's doing. And we just need to trust and let him order our steps. And sometimes it is painful, but that pain is also, like you said, building character and also making us more attuned to what we're supposed to be doing. Like we really need to not, like a lot of stuff is distraction. And we sit up here and we invite it in instead of saying, you know what, this doesn't belong. Like, thank you for that. Like, let me move on.
Why weren't you listening when he was telling you to move?
You know, because it was like, the rents and everything. It just seemed to me like it was and also I hate moving.
We procrastinate. It's a pain, but then at the end, you purge everything.
You purge. You know how much stuff I had to let go? And also like having stuff affected by a fire and smoke and stuff. It's like, then you just have to throw stuff away. You don't have to sit up here and like, oh, am I going to keep this? And like, I didn't even get to do that because it was like, it was no choice. So it was also freeing in a way. But, and for my son, who's so amazing, he's a Cancer. So the first thing I said to him, because I was so scared to tell him, and so I had him, we were in a hotel, I had him in the bathtub and eating French fries and having like a strawberry shake. And then I told him, and he was like, oh, was everybody safe? I said, yeah. He said, well, did anybody get hurt? I said, no. He's like, okay, cool. And he never asked, like, where's my stuff? Where's this? Where's that? And I was like, okay, cool.
You raised him right.
Girl, I was like, I wish I could be like you.
Forgiveness would be so much easier if you could just forget. Because like as soon as you pray and you forgive the person, you feel better. Yeah. But then as soon as you hear the person's name again and you see them again, you're like, oh, man, I hate you.
I know.
You want to do an eternal sunshine of the spotless mind?
That's right.
For real.
You forget and erase your memory. But it's all also lessons learned, like you said. What did I learn from this experience? You know, also moving into the future.
Exactly. And also I think it's like when you shine and when you do you and when you like, you know, don't divert any of your energy towards that person, like they also see you, you know what I mean? Like they also see you on the come up, what you're doing and your glow up, living your best life, right? They see you doing that. And so they're like, damn, you know, like I could have been in their life and I messed up, and I can understand that they're like being respectful of me, but you know, they've moved on, like that, you know, that's a chapter closed. But it's also good discernment, you know, because we need to learn as we go, like not everybody deserves to be in the circle, and the circle gets smaller as we know, as we grow, right? And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that, like it's okay that like people, you know, come in and then they also like create their exit. You know what I mean? Right. Sometimes that's important for us.
That's what I learned a lot as I was reading your book, because I know I do have a lot of people in my life, but it's okay to let certain people that's not benefiting your, I guess your, I don't know, energy.
Growth.
Your growth.
Yeah. Your energy. Sometimes you do have to let people go and things go, because I definitely need to declutter.
Yes.
And that's part of all this too. I have so much stuff that I just hold on to when it comes to people and when it comes to things.
Yeah. I'm like that too. I mean, I'm
like a hoarder.
See, yeah, like you don't be in the show.
Not as bad. Not as bad.
We don't want to have you on the
like,
show.
Well, I got this T-shirt from somebody that I went to high school with, and it means a lot. Like I'll keep something forever just because it has some type of sentimental value to it, but I'll never use it. So.
Right. I mean, it's cool to keep things that like create. Like, so I think part of it too is like if you create two buckets, like does it tire you? Does it inspire you? You know, like anything in life. And if you think about like these things that you keep or relationships or whatever, like when I look at this thing, if you're experiencing a positive memory, like that's okay to keep. But if you look and you see a closet of stuff, you're like, oh my God, like you got to do yoga after like going through your closet. Like you probably should release some of that stuff. So I think it's the same also with relationships. If you're on the phone with somebody and then when you get off, you're like, yo, I need to go meditate. Yeah. You know you need to not be talking to them, right? Oof. So I think it's like, it's so simple. Instead of people like doing like, you know, these mathematics in their head and having like a consortium about like, oh, should I be friends with this person? No, ask yourself, does this person tire me or do they inspire me? If they don't, you know, if you know, it's one or the other. It's not like it's very clear.
I'm writing that down, tire or inspire, because I always say you want to talk to people that make deposits in your life, not constant withdrawals. That's right.
Yeah, and a lot of people are making withdrawals. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And sometimes you don't even know they got your account information. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we got to be clear, you know? And I think that's really important, like that clarity as we move forward and stuff, so.
All right.
Well, her name is Latham Thomas. The book Own Your Glow.
And I just want to say you're an incredible person. I met Latham because of Johnny Nunez. You know how Johnny Nunez, the famed photographer, he'll have an event and then he'll be at an event and he'll be like, you need to know this person, Angela, Latham, Angela.
It was so funny.
And now that I think about it, that's how I met her too. Because I met Johnny.
He's like,
Johnny
you gotta know Latham.
Me to Andrea.
Yeah.
And then I met you through Andrea.
Well, thank you, Johnny Nunez.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah, Johnny, we love you.
Yeah.
She's on the Inspire list.
Word.
Yay.
Well, the book is out right now. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's The Breakfast Club.